Welcome to the Crime Dawg podcast with your host and content creator, Johnny FIORICA, who is the only person who gets excited when a telemarketer calls his phone because he has no friends. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the Crime Dawg podcast. I'm your host, Johnny FIORICA, retired veteran Rochester police detective, 30 years with the Rochester Police Department. Sitting alongside me, my trusted co-host, first guy up on deck as usual, 20-year veteran Rochester Police Department, legendary street cop, undercover cop, SWAT cop, homicide detective, David Simpson. Welcome to the pod, brother.
Happy to be here. We got our guy.
That's finally. Next up with the golf clap, served the Flower City 2.5 decades. You worked Genesee Lake, Clinton section, served all over the Rock. Lead negotiator currently for the RPD hostage team, self-proclaimed alpha male of this podcast, and self-proclaimed 1994 Hall of Famer of what we have no idea. Blanchard, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Johnny. I'm kind of blushing because, our guest is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, there's not many that I've shied away from with that statement. But
yeah, you're a little gun shy.
Yes.
This is kind of like Nolan Ryan curveball high and tight on the chin right now. Right?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I know that you, this has been talked about for quite some time. So,
folks, I'm sure you see it on the camera. We did it. I don't know how we did it, but we got legendary newscaster Don Alhart on the Crime Dawg podcast. Don, welcome to the pod.
It's great to be here and finally connect with all of us. I know we've been trying to put this together, so it is great to be here.
We have been. So, full disclosure, when we were on iHeartRadio a couple times, we did something, and the first time we filled in for Lonsberry back in April, we had what we called our bucket list. Bucket list, we talked live on radio. We talked about who we wanted, and you, sir, we're at the very top.
The number one draft pick. Very nice.
So bucket list checked off. Now.
I can leave now then. We're all done.
You'd be wise too.
So, but also on that episode, which I'm sure you didn't hear about, and Jason will say he had nothing to do with it, which he didn't.
Thank you.
We wanted you to come on the podcast so bad that David and I schemed to plot to do two things. Tell Wham 1180 to get their affiliate 13 that, hey, make Don come on our podcast, or plan B,
a little more aggressive,
was to kidnap you.
That was my idea. Right. Wasn't one of my better ideas. Fastest way, I think. No question about that. Well, I had it all laid out. We're going to conduct surveillance. It was just going to be a little guide him into the studio. Or
that had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Active law enforcement member.
So the whole time, full disclosure for Jason, he held up his hands. He said, guys, this guy is a legend. I want nothing to do with this conversation. So he stayed quiet on iHeart. All right. David and I then took the ball and we continued to cultivate a plan. But anyways.
We're retired. That's what you do in retirement.
You also said live on the air that, if by chance Don Alhart is listening, we'd love to have him on. And I believe I responded to, he's not listening. He's definitely not listening.
But here's the greatest part. Ready for this, Jason? In July, when iHeart called us back, Mr. Alhart, when I emailed him, I said, Don, hey, can't believe you just emailed me, Johnny. I was listening to you guys yesterday on Lonsberry.
Him and one other person. We were lucky.
Now, this is usually how it goes. We have a guest on and we just talk about
we just banter. Just jump in. Feel free to break balls.
It totally goes against all your news etiquette that you have for 58 years.
It is different because I'm always usually asking the questions. So,
I know.
Kind of waiting back to discuss is different for me.
So just like a legendary athlete, okay, which I categorize you as such in the news realm. So I'm going to throw some of your stats out there. You announced your retirement this year. Your last official broadcast, June 6, 2024, right? 58th anniversary with 13 Wham ABC. That is, if we had an audience, they'd be standing up cheering for you right now.
I'll clap that.
Well, my wife's back there. She's going to cheer for you. She just threw up the wave sign, the only wave. So then you joined the station full-time in 1966.
Yep. 66.
Oh, really?
My Italian mother-in-law was never happy with all of those.
You weren't superstitious.
Sixes, I should have been, I think, when I look back, but no, it was
June 6, 66.
Monday was, I graduated Ithaca College on the 4th of June, came home on Sunday, and started at Channel 13 on Monday.
Oh, so that ceremonially, that's why you did June 6, 2024.
Yeah. So I wanted to make it 58 years to the day I started. I mean, I'd actually worked there the summer before I went back to Ithaca College for my final year. But the full-time job started right after graduating.
Well, listen, Don, because I have to make everything about me, it's funny that you said that because I retired on my anniversary date to October 25th. I started on the 25th of 93. Ended on the 25th in 2023, and I did 30 years. But ceremonially, that's why you did it.
Yeah. And only 28 years shy of
correct.
Mr. Alhart.
It was like another career.
You were real close.
And 30 for you guys is pretty good, though.
So you joined the station in 66. Here is my favorite stat. You hold the Guinness Book of World Record for the longest career as a television news broadcaster.
Yeah, we actually got that at 50. And it was interesting. I always said, and we're still trying to have Guinness change that. I said, I want the record to be 58 years now at one station.
Right.
I don't think anybody's ever probably worked anywhere for 58 years straight through. But when we celebrated the 50th anniversary, and it was interesting because at 50 years, I wasn't ready to retire.
Right.
The station wanted to do something to honor it, so we had a very big gathering at the convention center, but we wanted to make it clear I wasn't retiring at that point, so they got the Guinness record, 50 years, we kind of celebrated that. And then as the years went by after that, we didn't think much about it.
Right.
Until one day, I was at the JCC locker room working out, and this guy in the back corner yells out, "Hey, I heard on CNN today you lost your record." And I go, What are you talking about? He says, yeah. He said, there's I can't remember if it was Mexico. It was somewhere else. This gentleman he at that point had 54 years. And I only had 50. But by this time, I'm already up to 56.
Right.
We just never renewed it. You don't, it's not like a renewal. You go in there every.
Right.
So I said, well, we never really thought about, keeping it current. So we went back in. I think the record right now officially is 57 years and some odd days. And I said, well, now we're hoping to finalize it at 58 years to the date, which takes it to that June date of June 6th. So it was kind of a long involved process. But for a while, we didn't have it. Now we've got it back for now.
For being a Guinness World Record holder, do you get like a trophy, a plaque?
You get to be in the book with the same person that has the world's longest tongue. I mean, yeah, and I don't make light of it. I mean, it's a wonderful. But when I look at some of the, I get some of the news releases who ate the most jelly beans or whatever it is. I mean, there's a lot of different things. But I guess you get that right to claim it. I guess, and there is. You have to go to the website. I'm still up there now, so people can research it and look it up. I guess it's more the bragging rights than anything else, and that's crazy. And just to say, I mean, it is a shortcut if someone says, well, what have you done? Where can I? And my wife will say, well, he's in the Guinness Book. Just look it up. We were at an event this past weekend. People did, they all of a sudden they Google it, and I don't have to make a lot of small talk anymore. I just, Google the name, look it up on Guinness, and then if you have any more questions, I'm happy to answer them. And they walk away. That's it.
Well, if it was when you first started and you had the 50, you'd have to lug the Guinness Book with you around in a suitcase and say, "Hang on a minute." And
there may be, I haven't found out yet if any of the records, either one is in the actual printed book. I would like to, I don't have the printed book. I do have a plaque. They do a very nice plaque. So I have two plaques now, one that has the 50, one that has the 57. So I have that plaque hanging at home. And I have a baseball cap that has the Guinness record. That one you don't wear. I mean, that's kind of wearing that around is a little, for some. I see you're in the Guinness Book. How do you know that? Well,
I'd wear that to Dunkin' Donuts to get my coffee. For sure.
Right. So I don't wear it an awful lot, but once in a while, we were in Aruba on vacation, and somehow got talking about the Guinness record, and it was a gentleman who worked. I think it was Dairy Queen, and his franchise, particular one, and him by name had the Guinness record for the largest shake or Sunday or whatever it was. I can't remember what it was now. So once in a while you get to compare. No, that's the only other Guinness record holder I think I ever met in person was the ice cream man.
Well, what's amazing is I'm not even partially through your stats, because this next one is unbelievable. Because most newscasters could work a career half of your time and not even be honored once. Mm-hmm. But you've been honored 5 times with the prestigious Edward R. Murrow Award for excellent in TV news. That's unbelievable, Don.
Those are, a lot of that goes to the team of people that we've had in place all those years. And I've always said I can't, a good portion of my success, and not to diminish what I've done, but a good portion of it is just being there. You're anywhere for 58 years. I get people now that say, I grew up watching you, and 30 years ago I moved away, and I came back 20 years later, and you're still there. So there's a familiarity that makes it easy for people to accept you. But those newscasts, and we had at that time I think the one we cherished the most was the one for best newscast in the nation, and that was we had a news director at the time, was very creative, very aggressive, and we had a staff that was mostly from Rochester. I mean, Jim Redmond, Patrice Walsh, James Flash, who had been here for a number of years, but wasn't originally from here. People that were born and raised here, Doug Embledge, Jenny Ryan. We had a core group of people that put together, and it was that particular, you submit one newscast for the Edward R. Murrow Award from a certain period of time. And it was, I can't remember the exact day, but it was a day when Jim Kelly was making news, something with the Buffalo Bills. And we had, again, I think some crime activity of some major stories. It was a newscast that really showcased every element of our staff and the capabilities that they had, and news, weather, and sports. So to get that, you get a regional award first. And that award took us, I think, to New Orleans, where I first met Walter Cronkite, who presented that award, which was really kind of special. That was a special moment. And the other Murrow Awards were for writing and and production. And those can be very, very simple. I can't remember. I wish I could find the script. I have it somewhere. A photographer came back. He'd gone out to an accident on 390, and a truck had overturned, but it was carrying chocolate syrup. And it spilled. I mean, talk about a hazmat, but this was all, and it was chocolate, and it was tire. And I remember writing. I don't have the exact script, but like there was a tire, but it was covered with chocolate. So I likened it to a donut. I mean, it was like I took this chocolate analogy and that was one story that maybe was a minute long at the most. Wow. But the writing of it, and again, the production of the photography and the editor who put that together, all three of it. I couldn't have done it alone. They couldn't have done it without the writing. So it was that team that brought it together. So that's what makes those awards so special, I think.
Well, spoken like a true legend. You give everybody else credit, but that's really great of you. Well, you rounded out your career, and this is the last stat. In 2010, you get inducted into the New York State Broadcasters Hall of Fame. That's phenomenal. But I'll tell you this, and this is what I'm going to tell our audience right now. All of these accolades aside, and I'm going to hopefully not get too emotional, but all of the accolades aside, the human side of you, and we talked about it on the elevator with the Charborough restaurant. My wife is off camera.
Yeah.
My special needs brother-in-law, who we do a special sign-off for him after every broadcast. He's special needs, he's nonverbal. And you walked up so humbly. We knew exactly who you were, but you walked up like you didn't think if we knew who you were or not. You introduced yourself. You started talking about the book that you wrote for the Arc of Monroe for the special needs. And you saw my brother-in-law, Frankie, there in his wheelchair. And you just engaged us in conversation. And Don, when I tell you it was the most wholesome, purest thing that I had ever seen. And I have seen a lot of things in the course of my 30-year RPD career. But it definitely tugged at my heartstrings. And that is a testament to who I said, man, this guy is a great, great man. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for coming on the podcast. But we're going to take our first break here. And we're going to come back on the other side. Stick with us. Folks, legendary newscaster Don Alhart. Stick with us on the other side. Thank you, folks. WorkAlerts.com. That's Work Alerts with a Z. Work Alerts helps retail, restaurant, hospitality operators control their labor costs and better communicate with their staff through simple, easy-to-use work scheduling and text messaging system. Set budgeted hours for your departments to prevent overscheduling, manage employee time off requests, and availability. Again, that's WorkAlerts.com. WorkAlertz.com. Labor management and employee engagement made simple. Folks, thanks for sticking with us on the other side. We have legendary newscaster Don Alhart, who did stay with us. So, Don, thanks for sticking around. So, what I want to get into, I'm going to throw some. So, I got a little small paragraph that I'm going to read to you.
Okay.
So, just to jog your memory, double initial murders, 1971 to 73. The Thurston Road bank robbery, 1981. Brighton Axe murderer, 1982. The Mob Wars, the A&B Mob Wars, 1978. Serial killer Arthur Shawcross, 1988 to 1989. The Brinks heist, 1993. Snug Harbor bombings, 93. The Jennifer Kuhn abduction, 1993. Kelly and Polton, 1994. And then the murder of Derek Roby, also in 93. Yeah. You've seen all of those as far as reporting.
You touched on the double initial. I still remember, Michelle Mayenza, Carmen Colon, Wanda Walkowitz was found in Webster. Yeah. Carmen Colon was found in China. It was kind of a,
what a memory.
I mean, but those, come back. My memory is not always that great, but those do kind of, stick in your mind. I remember the Brinks night, because I remember I think coming back, it happened at evening, as I recall. I was coming back to the station at that time, and it was, was unfolding. And it was a different time because you didn't have cell phones. You didn't have a lot of communication. So we were at the mercy of making phone calls, trying to find out, what is going on or what's happening. And if you, a much smaller staff, so you might send one person out alone. Attica prison riot, which wasn't on your list. But that was one where I ended up going by myself all the way to Attica with a news car and a film camera and only one payphone across the street from the prison that every journalist wanted to use. There was one photographer in Rochester, Charlie Planet from Channel 8. I don't know if he ever crossed your paths at all. Charlie Planet was one of the original, the original news photographers in town. And at the time, he was actually made a special deputy and had the radios in the car to Cobb's Hill. He would often arrive at a scene of a fire and accident before the fire police department did. He was car 170, and he would call in, and he would go out and shoot his film. And he had a ham radio phone in his car, so he was the only one. Back then, it was channel, I guess it was Channel 8 by then, because it was Channel 5 when I worked there before coming to Channel 13. I worked at what is now Channel 8 for 3 summers. But Charlie was the only one that had that kind of communication. So we had to go down there all alone with a film camera and and then drive back to Rochester, which took an hour, if you're in Attica, process that film, look at it, and then put it on the air. So it was a long process. But yeah, those stories, the Shawcross, each one that unfolded, and there was always that moment where this is something, it's very similar. Is it tied in with that or not? And how soon can you make that speculation?
So, like you talk about no cell phones, so you must have carried a bunch of dimes in your car, wondering where the hell the next payphone could jump.
I did. It was interesting when the Erie Canal collapsed out in Bristol's Basin. That was, I'm trying to remember what year it was, but it collapsed, and with enough force that took 2 or 3 homes right off their foundation.
Oh, really?
So it's just all around by the Burgundy Basin in that area.
Yeah.
And I'm driving to work, because I worked at night. I'm driving to work, and I'm on Linden Avenue, lived out in Penfield. And I'm listening to WHAM radio at the time, and they said we have reports of a collapse of the Barge Canal. And there was a payphone at the corner of Linden Avenue by the fire station. I got out of the car, called the station, because I said, I've got my camera. I think rather than come to work, I'll just go right there. I'm right at 4, I can get there. And so we did. So we had some of the first film, and it was just devastating. I mean, those homes, I can't remember. I must have been some lives lost, but I can't recall. But it was that, calling the payphone, telling them where I was going to be, and, getting there. After the riots, and I was at Channel 8 at the time of the first riots. I worked in those summers, but even in 66, we had upgrades again. We had to carry with it. We didn't even have pagers yet. We had a little, looked like a pager, and it was just a broadcast frequency. And we all were given them at the station and told on the hour, turn it on and listen and see if there's a message, because you might have to come into work.
Oh, wow.
And that was the only way we could reach anyone. I mean, think about it. You'd be out doing something, unless we had a home. You had a phone at home hanging on the wall. That's all you had. So we would carry this little, it looked like a pager it does now. And when we got that first pager, I mean, even the first one had no digital information on it. It would beep, and that would let you know to call the station. And we thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread. We actually had a way to reach out and beep. That beep went off, and you'd call the station. What do you want? Of course, then you go to one that actually had a digital message with a number to call, and just never even thinking about what a cell phone would be like today. Right. I mean, it was, the phones we have now are as good of a live camera that we have with a major satellite truck.
And you see a lot of these reporters now, I don't really like it, but you see them holding their cell phones and referencing their notes. I understand, because that's the generation, right? They take their notes in their phone, but it feels like they're not as genuine with the camera when they're looking down and reading their stuff.
And when I watch that, it's interesting. I've seen people get up at podiums. Like, I do a lot of emceeing, and they'll give a speech with an iPad or a phone. And as techie as I am, and I'm probably as old as I am in the newsroom, I'm the first one people come to. I just love technology. My dad had an appliance and hardware store over on Culver Road growing up. So we weren't a wealthy family, but we had all the gadgets first. So I've always been the gadget guy. So I've always been the first one to get those gadgets and enjoy them. Yeah. So even now, I watch somebody, I still don't have the confidence that the battery isn't going to die. Something isn't going to happen. I can't stand. I always have the paper. I always have a paper.
Well, it's like
we do. We finally got to that when the news said. They finally took the printed scripts away. So we have iPads. We have the teleprompter, but the backup is the iPad. So if they're kind of tied together, if one of them goes.
Well, it's like even reading a book. I was saying to Jay, I like holding the book. I don't like reading off a Kindle.
Yeah,
I like having the book, being able to take notes in the column, like having the actual book.
But they do it, man. They're the young reporters now, I mean, and they can type a note in there faster than I still haven't gotten to that. Or they'll dictate. They'll dictate a whole script verbally. It comes in, and then they send it into the newsroom, and you don't have to take a lot of time to retype what they're sending you.
So did you find like you talk about the Erie Canal incident? Did you find that did they actually have you at one point say, you know what, why don't you just keep your camera in the car with you just in case, or did you just happen to have it in the car with you?
I bought one. I mean, that was I remember going. It was the LeBeau photo over on Lyle, and we at that time we were shooting 16 millimeter black and white film. The film we used at the TV station eventually had a stripe on the other side if it was being used to record audio. So I remember buying it. The one I bought had perforations on both sides of the film. They had to modify it for me, but I bought the Bolex camera, so I always had my own camera that I could use, and we would shoot. It was 100-foot rolls of film. Eventually, we were thrilled when we finally could shoot with color film. I mean, the transition, every time I say this, I feel a little older than I am. But, to make the transition from black and white to color film, there was a time where we used to shoot, we didn't have a color processor. Channel 10 did. And we wanted to compete. We shot color news film in the morning and took it out to Brockport to Dynacolor to have it processed. In the afternoon, we would shoot black and white film so that we could process it. So there might be a given story where if you did the interview in the morning and something else in the afternoon, part of the story was in black and white, part of it was in color. We just wanted to get that, on the air. But it was, something. Yeah, I always once I had that camera, that was always something I kept with me. The night of the Allendale fire, the school was on fire, and again, this is before all of the cell phone, but it was back at a time where everybody knew the fire dispatcher. I picked up the phone. I think it was 428-7200. I can't remember, but I would call up and just the fire dispatcher. And hi, this is Don. Yeah, Allendale fire. The school's on fire. Grabbed my camera, ran over there, and got the only footage of that building being on fire. But there was no, National Ambulance used to have a radio. George Heisel gave me, and it would only fire up for a very major newsworthy event. If National Ambulance was responding and their crew said this is something the news ought to cover, and he gave me this radio to fire up with a quick siren, and I said, "What do I do with it?" He says, "Put it on top of your refrigerator in the kitchen." I said, "Why?" He says, "Just trust me. You'll hear it. You'll wake up out of a sound sleep, and the rest of the family won't." And I had that on top of the refrigerator for years. I would get up in the middle of the night, call a photographer, and meet him at a fire or an accident or a shooting or a mob hit or whatever it was. and the rest of the family never even knew. I'd come home, they never knew I got up. And that, it was just something you get attuned to, as you guys know. You listen to those scanners, you hear something.
We call it a radio ear.
Yeah, you can hear it all day long. I'll be in my office when I was at work, and the scanner's in the other room, and they're going and I'll jump up and I go, "What?" I go, "I just heard something sound like." I get either a tone or a voice or a number or something that I heard something. And just your mind gets attuned to that. So that's how we would function with them.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Go ahead, David.
I had a quick question because you mentioned other TV stations. How much was the rivalry like between like your 13 team and you, and like, would you look at the ratings of other places? Were you kind of like real competitive, or did you just go about your business and kind of?
I think it was more competitive, and probably it still is competitive. We don't hear about the ratings as much. I don't see a lot of people, in fact, the last year or so, if people ask me, I said, I think we're still number one, because if we weren't, the other stations would be saying they were. So they never really talked about the numbers or sharing them. And plus, they're so fragmented now, because you'll sell to a specific sponsor. So if you want a targeted audience, if your audience, you may be number one with the 18 to 54, but somebody else may be number one with another age group, and somebody else number one overall. But the person that has the age group that somebody's looking for, if a nursing home was looking for, they probably advertised on my newscast. I don't know. But I mean, if the baby boomers were watching one show, you target them with the,
So you were aware of it, but it wasn't like a cutthroat type thing.
I mean, I think there was always the bragging rights part of it, but it was never, probably never an overriding concern. I think for us, it was just more of a concern to do the fair job and reporting it. And that sometimes meant not being the first one to report it, because we wanted to make sure we were we're accurate with what we were doing. Now it's tough.
It's funny that you said that, Don, because we started this platform, we started this podcast because we felt that that lane was wide open.
Yeah.
And I think that journalism, and I'm not speaking out of line, but I feel like journalism, from being an outsider, I think what you said is going on now. It's better to be first than to be right.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you had such longevity, because you were focused on getting the story right and accurate instead of trying to be first. And when we created this platform, this podcast, we were like, you know what, there's going to be times, even though we're all cops, there's going to be times when we got to shoot it down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't just throw a blanket over our brothers and sisters and say, you know what, no matter what happens, they're always right, because they're not. And that's what you and your staff used to do. You guys used to literally shoot it down the middle. And I kind of felt, and David and Jason agreed with me, much like they came on with me, is because we don't feel that happens today in this day and age,
And this stuff, social media has changed so much.
Changed the game.
I mean, I have grandchildren, and I worry about them in school. Just it was one thing to have someone be a bully or talk about you. Or it may have gotten around as a few kids. Now, they just put it right out there. Everybody's got it. They all have it on the phone. And when something happens, and that's the one thing that was a constant in our newsroom. Some people, they'd see something on Twitter and they go, let's find out on our own. If we don't have two sources that tell us this, we're not going to go with it. And then somebody say, well, the newspaper's already reporting it. All right, that's one source. That's what, but we're not, we would hold back.
So that's interesting. So a news source wouldn't be good enough reason to run something. You have to validate it.
Yeah, we always had two. They always said, that was always kind of the rule, two sources. And I'm trying to think, I think we would count another media maybe as one of them. But we wanted they would always call to confirm. And a lot of times we would call and it wasn't quite the way it had been portrayed on social media. Sure. And we were glad that we held off. It is scary. I went to Attica College. I remember a few years ago now, one of the deans coming here for a talk and sharing a survey they had done. And they said to young people, what's more important, to be accurate or to be first? And it said first. First.
Wow, that's crazy.
We went, no, that's,
credibility.
But, what it is, I think people that have it, you look in your phone, you say, well, if somebody can see that on their phone, then why shouldn't we put it on the air? And we can go back and correct it if it's wrong. I hope we don't get to that, but that's a feeling people say, if you know about it, then we have every right to know about it. Well, we know about it, but we're not sure about it. But I think we're seeing that more now. We're hearing there are reports that such and such is that. So they're hedging a little bit.
Yeah.
And that
they're not reporting it. They're kind of like.
But we've heard there are reports that such and such is. But we were still, and I still, very recently before I retired, we'd be at a crime scene and the reporter's doing a live report and we say, we know it's a fatal shooting. We know it's a fatal shooting. But you guys didn't told us that yet.
Right.
And so we would go on and say, what's going on? There's a major police presence here. And that basically all our reporter would say. Now we knew it was a fatal. We know the accident was a fatal or whatever it is. But if we didn't have it out of the mouths of somebody on the scene or an officer, and there would be times when I'd be sitting in the anger desk saying, well, saying here, they're putting out a report. We don't have it officially yet. And so we'd always say, well, what is going to be the harm in holding back? Is there that much value in saying we were the first? Well, that was it. I'm sorry. It wasn't. It was being first. I'm sorry. I had to go back and correct that because now I remember that at Ithaca College. What's more important, being first or being accurate? And it was the first that the scared people because that's what they said. We got to be first. And in our case, I think at that point it was, when I look back at the times, if people only watch one newscast at a time. That's what I would tell the newsroom. They aren't sitting there like we are in the newsroom with all three stations up there and go, oh, they got it, you don't. They're watching what they're watching. So if they're watching us and it took 3 minutes later to confirm it was a fatality, the viewer didn't know. And in the course of their life, what difference did it make that they didn't get that as soon as anybody else? If they got it from a source they respect and people they know, I got a card because I'm still going through thank you notes. And it was just a phrase somebody wrote, thank you for your caring personality. It wasn't, thank you for your journalism, thank you for your accuracy. I got emotional reading the card because they said thank you. In watching the newscast, the fact that they perceived I cared was the reason they watched our station. And I've always said that. I've always said that to even the young reporters now. A lot of news is very tragic. And it impacts families. And so when you read that story or you report from the scene, chances are the family of the victim isn't watching news that night. But do your story as if they are. That when you reach out and share what has happened, you share it in a way that if the family of that person that was impacted is watching, they will, accept what you're saying. And I think that, I hope that prevails. I think it has in our newsroom that people really take on that persona that makes it easier for a viewer, I think. It makes it, if you have confidence in somebody that's sharing that news, that makes it easier for you.
Plus, it goes into the trust. Like, you also trust the messenger. I mean, that's a big part of it. When you were on the air, I think I could speak for Jay and everyone else. Like, you felt like there was, our generation, or our Walter Cronkite. You were like you were the voice. Sometimes I didn't even see you. I just hear the voice, and it was a real.
That's coming back. I know you don't watch Facebook. You don't have Facebook. But Facebook right now, Walter Cronkite's picture is coming up more and more on Facebook. Just random posts. Remember the time when news was
news was news.
News was new. People are sensing it. And I think there's not a day goes by now that I don't find Walter Cronkite's picture just as a reminder to folks that, remember what it used to be. Yeah. We're not going to go backwards, obviously. But I think there's enough of that, the memory of what it was, that hopefully will prevail with what we have today.
Well, Don, you definitely, in our eyes, are right up there with Walter. So, folks, stick with us on the other side. We got legendary newscaster, Don Alhart. Asher Beverages, the Rock's leader in old style, homemade lemonade. It's Asher's secret recipe, so don't bother asking. If you're looking to impress, want to be one of the cool kids and be the hit at your next party? Bring one of Asher's delicious drink concoctions with you. Asher Beverages Old Style Homemade Lemonade is the way to go. Asher Beverages are available at all local retail outlets. Folks, thanks for sticking with us. On the other side, we got super newscaster Don Alhart with us. Don, thanks for sticking with us. Off camera, we had a lot of great conversations. Our super producer always seems to ask the best questions of the interview. So Danny Agnew, our super producer, had talked about your sourcing. And one of the things that I listened to and I picked out of is some things that you have already said a little bit prior, but you elaborated on it. You talked about, you did have sources, you had reliable sources, and you had them in all walks of life. Specifically because we are the Crime Dawg podcast, you had a lot of good relationships with law enforcement. And it was a solid relationship for what it sounded like, because even if you had information, you would call your sources within the police departments and say, hey, this is what I got. Yes, you confirmed it, but...
And there would be that two-way street. They would say, I can tell you this, but you can't use it yet. Or I can tell you this off the record, and we keep it off the record.
Right.
You may want to know this for background. And, over a period of time, if, you never violated that trust, that became a great relationship, because it would give you the ability to put the story together or put the story in perspective sometimes. We're hearing this is this. It's off the record, it might be a suicide. You may not want to, it doesn't mean you don't, something's going on and there's an impact because traffic's been affected or whatever it is. But you may want to hold off on sensationalizing it too much because it may not be what you think. Now, you wouldn't go on the air and say that, but you'd keep it in the back of your mind. So you could, instructing a newscast, say, well, we may want to put this emphasis on it or put it in place. And then again, as we talked about, just getting information, and it was before computers where you could change it just before you went on the air. We had these typewriters with large type, and we'd type it with carbon. I asked reporters now, I was describing that, and they, carbon paper? What's carbon paper? I said, well, that's how we used to make a second or third copy of something. They not have a clue. But we would type it up, and you could make changes and write in it, but we would oftentimes get information and agree to hold it, and if we couldn't use it, we wouldn't. And if we called back, and got the go-ahead, we would.
That respect, that sourcing, that's what kept those lines of communications always pure, right? And that sourcing, when someone said, hey, you know what, I talked to Don Alhart, and they could say, you know what, and you say the same thing on the other side in law enforcement, I talked to so-and-so, and you're like, and it was an honesty and a trust there. And what really hit me, though, was you talked off camera, this is what I want to bring up, you talked about with your law enforcement sources, and they say, hey, Don, we haven't reached out to the family yet.
Yeah.
And you respected that.
Yeah.
Which is huge, because I think in today's day and age, you talk about technology, and when an incident happens, especially with a cop, everyone's like, give us the body worn camera now.
Yeah.
Give us the body worn. And what they don't understand, and what the public doesn't understand, or maybe doesn't want to understand, is the importance of putting a very solid case together. Because even if it's a police-involved shooting, or even if it's not, the victim and the victim's family need closure at the end. And those steps that you take and that you make as a detective or a police officer are so crucial. And some things may be on camera and some things may not. You won't want to release it to the public because it will have a negative and adverse effect on the case when it goes to trial. But to satiate the public's palate sometimes, it becomes like overwhelming, I think,
Well, I was just thinking too, in a way, the body cam does invade the privacy of the people who are in the view, whether they were directly involved in what's going on or not. It's a tough one to put in perspective.
Well, and one of the things when I remember when I was in homicide was that we ran into a lot was, let's say Jay has a body worn camera on and there's some things going on that camera, and I'm trying to interview someone, and if that video gets out, that person's going to know what is on camera, and I can't use that when I interview them. So that's why sometimes holding it, I'd always be worried, like, slow down on the camera. I got to interview this person. I don't want them to see it on the news and then recount their memory, and then their memory's off the video, not off what really happened.
Yeah, or tactics, right? I mean, being on the hostage team as long as I have been, you worry about the body-worn camera when you're doing a negotiation and you're talking to somebody. Number one, you don't want to give up tactics. Yeah. You don't want to give up strategies that you use for future cases that you might have down the line, But I do have to get to Jay because Jay's been giving me these eyes, Al. Don over your shoulder. He's been giving me these eyes like, hey, Johnny, shut the heck up because I want to ask Don a question.
Well, first of all, I could sit here and listen to Don talk for about 5 hours because I think everything he says is like super interesting just from the totality of what he's done in his career. What I find interesting is that you're a hometown guy. You're from Rochester. You stayed in Rochester. When you started your career, you said in 1966 with WHAM. I mean, that was basically the height or pretty close to the Vietnam War. Yeah. And I'm wondering, did you ever have any desire to cover internationally? Did you ever want to maybe go overseas and cover anything? I mean, that was obviously a pretty big time in our history as a country with that.
It probably wouldn't have been something afforded to a local reporter at the time. At the time, I was in the Army Reserve. So there was more of a likelihood at one point that we would ship over there. My unit was out of Penang, the 770th. We were combat engineers and then construction engineers. So we would be the group the company you'd send over to build a runway in Vietnam. And for a while, because I was 6 years out of your life. So I started at Channel 13 in 66, started in the Army Reserve in 67. So from then to 73, did both. I mean, I would do the 11 o'clock news on a Friday night, and at 6 a.m, I'm driving to Penang to spend the whole day on the reserve and then come home and then go back Sunday and do the same thing again. For a while, we were on the selected reserve force, which meant we went 2 weekends a month instead of one, because we would be the next unit that might be sent over there. We never had to go, so that was the one thing. We did extra duty. But it really impacted our news coverage because, again, we're going back to a time where we're not using social media, we're not using computers. We have a wire machine in the corner of the newsroom that's just cranking out typewritten news stories. And once in a while, we'll come across flash, death in Vietnam, so-and-so, sergeant from Rochester, New York. And that's it. That's all you'd get. And Dick Burt, for the most part, would be the one, my co-anchor at the time, because he was older and had, again, set a tone, I think, that embraced me and prevails now. We would delicately look up in a crisscross directory, a book, because there's no computers, find a name and a family, and then make that call, hoping that, assuming if it's on the wire, they probably already know. And only making that call because we didn't just want to go on the air and say, by the way, Sergeant so-and-so from Rochester has been killed in Vietnam. But where did he go to school? What do people think of him? And so Dick would make those calls, talk to parents sometimes. Very emotional, And again, I guess that's probably the roots that I was talking about earlier, being compassionate to the viewers, to the people impacted and carrying that through when we put the story together. And so we would get not long calls, but enough that when we put the story on the air, we could personalize it so that if you knew this person or, grew up in their neighborhood, you had it wasn't just a name we're throwing out there for the sake of throwing out a name. But it was a tough time. And the anti-war protests were I was listening today on the radio because I listened to 60s music. The Eve of Destruction with Barry McGuire. I don't know if you ever heard that song. Look it up. This was back in the 60s. The Eve of Destruction, Barry McGuire, and he's talking about the anti-war protests and that time fighting for segregation. It's in many ways kind of scary when you think about it in terms of what's going on today. The song can almost span the generations. But it was in trying to cover all of that and put it in perspective. And then, of course, when people came back from Vietnam, that was emotional because there wasn't a huge welcome home. It was very tough.
Kind of playing off what Jay had asked you, did you ever have opportunities where you really considered leaving Rochester to go to like a major network?
Very few. I mean, and a lot of it was interesting. One of the first ones was to Buffalo. They needed at that time. I was doing weather at the time too. They needed a weekend weather person, and then that person would report environmental reports 3 days a week. And now, again, we're going way back before modern technology. We're shooting film. So if you wanted to do an audition, you had to send a film to somebody. You didn't want anybody else to know about it. So I'm out at the Sheraton Hotel out by the airport covering a news conference in a conference room. And when everybody left, my photographer and I are alone in this conference room. And I go over to the chalkboard. I sketch out a map of the United States, and he rolls the film camera, and I do a little weather report. Send it to Vern Rotman over in Buffalo. He calls me up a few days later. He said, Don, I got your film. He said, that's probably the worst audition I've ever seen in my life. It was terrible. But I see something there. Maybe, would you come to Buffalo and do it? I went to Buffalo. I auditioned. He offered me the job. And I turned it down, and he yelled at me. He said, at that time, we were number 3. He said, you're going to stay at the number 3 station for the rest of your life? I stayed at the station. It wasn't number 3 the rest of my life. But, at that time, again, I was in the Army Reserve. I would have had changed reserve units. Our family, I just wasn't comfortable. Years later, one of our reporters, Al White, was our troubleshooter.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
And Al had applied for a job in Philadelphia and sent a tape. I get a call. Don, we've seen you introduce, somebody applied for a job, and we see you introducing him. Because, again, you couldn't edit a lot back then. So my introduction of Al White was on the tape. Would you send us some more of your work? So I put some tape together and sent them. Now I'm half packed my bags for this one because I figured they called me.
Right.
They noticed me. So I sent them I still have somewhere in my scrapbook the letter. Dear Don, we're looking for someone who exudes more warmth on the air. Sincerely, Bob Feldman. I did see Bob Feldman years later at a convention somewhere in a booth for some other company, so I didn't go up to him and say hello, but didn't get that job.
Would you have taken it? Would you have taken it?
I don't know. It was interesting because years later, a news director that we'd had here went to Washington, and the anchor of the WJLA was retiring. And she called me to go down to Washington and flew me in for an audition. At that time, we had just moved to a new home in Penfield. My oldest son was starting high school. My daughter was starting junior high. My youngest was starting kindergarten. And I went down to Washington and did this audition. And when I didn't get that job, but when I talked to a good friend who knew this news director well, they said, you did a good job, but they could tell you really didn't want it. You didn't thirst for it. They wanted, at that level, someone that really wanted that job. They said, you auditioned like you were almost afraid you might get it. And I think that's probably put it, because I wanted to know if I could get it, but I and again, deeper and family was here. My parents, my wife's parents are here. family is here. I get involved in the community. I've been active in different groups. As those ties strengthened, it just became less likely that I was going to leave. And I don't really regret that. I think I really, and as I said, sometimes you become more valuable. It's it's not the most lucrative business in the world. In fact, salaries are now going the other way. But sometimes your worth is just that familiarity. You've been there so long, people, I know, well, that guy, I remember him. I'll stay on that station for a while. So
that's amazing, though. When you talk about the progression and how it was back then, and how you had to literally send your tapes in, and now today, I mean, they could just pop on anyone's social media and anything like that.
Now, if a reporter wants a job, he's here's the link to my YouTube tape. Click on this link, and you've got a sample of everything that I do. That's as simple as that.
Right. Folks, stick with us on the last segment for Don Alhart. We're going to come back to you not live because we're pre-recorded, but we're coming back to you. Stick with us, Don Alhart. Gold Shield Pro Services, we're your trusted residential and commercial inspection experts. Call us for one of our professional, nationally certified inspectors to make your real estate investments seamless. At Gold Shield Pro Services, we specialize in thorough inspections, providing you with insights you need to make informed decisions. From pre-sale, post-sale, or annual routine inspections, your number one asset is our top priority. Call 662-7725. That's 662-7725. Or visit us at goldshieldproservices.com to book your appointment today. Folks, thanks for sticking with us. On the other side, legendary newscaster Don Alhart. Don, thanks for sticking with us. And
great to be here.
So we have so many great conversations off camera, but 2 off cameras ago, we started talking about, we mentioned Muhammad Ali. Yeah. And you said you had a great story about Muhammad Ali.
I got a call, Muhammad Ali at the time, and I had done some work with inner city churches. I grew up at Lake Avenue Baptist Church, so I still had a lot of connections with the Baptist churches and other churches. And I get a call from a gentleman, one of the pastors, and said, Muhammad Ali is coming in to speak. He said, would you like to have an exclusive interview with him? This is when the station is downtown at the time now, Clinton Avenue South. I said, that'd be great. He said, well, we can bring him up. I said, well, if you can bring him up to the station. In that time, we had 3 separate shows. We had news at 11 o'clock. Then we had, I think weather was in the middle, 5 minutes. And then we had Sports Corner with Ron DeFrance. And so I said, if you can bring him to the station, we'll put him on live with Ron DeFrance. Okay, Don, you can do something. So I go to the newsroom. I set up this interview with, I think it was Muhammad Ali then. He might have still been Cassius Clay, but it was Muhammad Ali. Yeah, because he was here with the church. And they all looked at me and they just started laughing. They go, Don, you've been taken. Don't be, he's not coming up to the station. That would be ridiculous. We don't even know for sure he's coming to town. And I was young. I just started, I said, I don't know. The guy said he was going to be here. And I told him to come to Clinton Avenue South, take the elevator to the 8th floor. We're waiting for him. I go, yeah, Don, you go. Go out there and wait in the elevator. So the newscast is on the air, and the weather's on the air. And I'm beginning to think, I think they're right now. But I still go to the elevators and I wait. Bing! The elevator opens. There's Muhammad Ali.
Oh. Wow.
We bring him down the hall. Well, of course, I'm feeling great because I'm proven right. I really had doubted myself by then, but we bring him in live on this. Now, back then the set was not very elaborate, and the backdrop was just a big cardboard montage of sports figures. And Joe Frazier was one of them. So we bring Muhammad Ali out, and Ron DeFrance is interviewing him live on the air. And of course, he goes, hey, Joe, I don't like that. And he takes a punch at Joe Frazier. And Ron's going, please, you're going to knock our whole set over.
What do they mean I'm not the champ? I mean, where did all this stuff come, I'm not the champ? What's it like to be defeated? I don't even know what it's like to be whooped. Why would you have this in here knowing I'm going to be on the show?
I'll tell you, if we would have known.
He and I don't get along.
I know you don't.
Seriously, we don't. get along no kind of way. Watch out for the setup.
And the best part for me was, I was a young kid. I mean, if we were downtown, I had to be with only a year or two of me started. I had to be like 68, 60, somewhere in there. We moved to Henrietta in 73. So it was that late 60s, early time. And I think it was just about the time he had taken on the Muhammad Ali persona. So that was still, we reminisced for that many times because I said, I was right. I couldn't doubting myself for a while.
The feeling that you got when Muhammad Ali stepped off the elevator is the feeling that Johnny and David got when they've been hoping and wishing that you were going to come and join us.
That was our Muhammad Ali moment.
That was 100%.
Nothing for me to knock over, though. I won't.
That's right. Seeing Don walk into our studio was our Muhammad Ali moment.
Yeah,
the one that comes to mind, and I've told this story before, so probably people have heard of it. But again, this goes back to being recognized. And it was the McDonald's over the hill from the station out in Henrietta. Oh, this is 20 years ago. But I'm driving through the drive-thru on my lunch hour, and I go to the first window and to place my order, and you can tell if you're on television, you can tell when people recognize you. So she didn't say anything. Takes my order. I drive to the second window to pick it up, and there's like 6 people there from the staff. Now you get a little puffed up by this, and this woman answers and says, "We can't believe it. We can't believe it. At our McDonald's, Bob Barker."
That's good.
And I just said, "Well, spay and neuter your pets." And I think, but I tell that story mostly. I say, you know what? When you just about that time when you get a little too full of yourself, there will be someone that brings you back to reality. And that was the funniest moment. And that was, they say 20 years ago. So I probably did look, he was older then, but I had the gray hair. The look was there.
Oh, that's a great
And that
story.
was, I said, that we need to be humbled once. We need to put it in perspective.
Don't we all?
Yeah, that's funny.
We do a good job of humbling one another in this in the podcast, so that's funny.
Yeah, we had to have a text string, Don, prior to you coming on. We all had to agree that there was a certain decorum.
Jay and I got yelled at for our vulgarity. So we get arguments off the air.
Johnny threatened to put us in timeout, so we were trying to be on our best behavior.
I hope I haven't held you back too much.
No.
You looked like you had a question, Jay, for...
No, I just was laughing about...
He just wanted to swear.
He wanted to
this is the longest I've ever gone without swearing.
Been able to do that.
Impressive. It's impressive.
It is impressiove. My mom would be very happy.
Your wife and children.
If my mom actually watched the podcast, she would actually be very impressed.
Correct.
I can still remember that one time, one of the biggest debates we had in the newsroom was when Mayor Bill Johnson said he was pissed off. And we said, "Can we use that?" I said, "Well, the mayor said it."
Right.
If the mayor of the city said it, we actually had a little debate on that.
Well,
that takes you back one quick thing because we talked about the mob trials.
Oh yeah.
Now the mob trials take us back to Frank Valenti. You talk about a mouth. I mean, every other word was a bomb. And he would come out of the Hall of Justice courtroom and he would just rant and rave. Well, we had sound movie cameras at that time that had, now on the one side of the film was just an optical audio track. And you would have to then take that film after it was developed and put it on a little, machine. You would roll it through slow, find the swear word, and then take a minute, thin piece of tape and try to cover the word that he said.
Oh, wow.
Well, you'd get some of them, but you get
the word is an F-bomb.
Catch all of them. But I see Frank Valenti's nephew once in a while when I work out. He reminisces about his Uncle Frank. And I said, well, he put us to the test from an editing standpoint many times when he would come out of the Hall of Justice. And
well, if there was a swear jar at the Crime Dawg podcast, you could probably send all your grandkids to Harvard.
We could vacation. We could take a nice vacation.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, Don, we can't thank you enough. You are a Rochester legend. You're literally someone that's an idol of ours.
I appreciate it.
Not just with us, but our entire families. To say that this was an honor for us would be an understatement. We can't thank you enough. So we wish in the next chapter with you and your wife and your family, we wish you nothing but good graces and God bless you and your family. And from the Crime Dawg podcast, we loved watching you for all these years. So thank you for coming on, Don.
I appreciate that. And as I say, I've done a few podcasts recently. This has been the most fun. This is and, it's a more relaxing atmosphere, and we've had a chance to. We probably should have recorded all the conversations in between the breaks and had a whole nother show. But maybe that's a good one for our next podcast. Call it In Between the Breaks.
Yeah.
Oh,
with Don Alhart.
Don Alhart.
Hey, you two are out. You're done.
In between the breaks.
No, not you. Just there.
Good choice. I voted for David off the island.
Well, Don, thanks for coming, folks. Legendary Don Alhart's here. We can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Go to thecrimedawgpodcast.com for a library of all of our podcasts and episodes. Go to our YouTube channel at Crime Dawg Podcast, where you can also see our library. Thanks for sticking with us for this episode. Like my brother-in-law, Frankie Grassi, says, if you can't make the next one, who cares?